Hello, lovely ladies and listeners. Welcome back to Wamen. We have had quite the hiatus again. No doubt we'll probably have another one after this. We're very, very busy. To clear up any questions I had both at the Witan event and comments on YouTube, etc., we will be getting back to it, Wamen videos, that is, on a more regular basis, probably towards the end of October. But we'll post any that we can when we can. We're all very, very busy. There's a few women on in the group that are moving house. There's others currently away, etc. Work and various other things. We're very, very busy. I've got quite a good excuse, I think, for, for not being around in October. But with that aside, we've got a lovely panel this evening. One I don't think we've had. We haven't had this this collection of women. So without further ado, welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Shield Maiden, if you can reply, I'm aware you are on a train, so.
Yes, hello from Scotland.
Thank you for joining us. And Thought Crime Queen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So the reason we have this panel is because we all attended the Witan, and we even have one of the speakers, Elizabeth. I think it's only right that we start with you. Your talk was absolutely fantastic. The Return of the King, very, very enjoyable speech, very notable. Are there any points you want to make on it, or do you want to pass comment, tell us, for those who weren't there, what your speech was about, etc.?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So my talk was focusing on Historia Regii Britanniae, which was a book written by a man named Geoffrey of Monmouth from the 12th century, and it's famous for a number of reasons. It heavily impacted how our ancestors viewed the past, with the founding myths of Britain, such as Brutus of Troy. It also inspired Shakespeare's King Lear, and most importantly, it also popularized the tales of King Arthur all across Europe. But I was particularly interested in it for the work served in Geoffrey's time really as a moral exemplar, warning his Anglo-Norman contemporaries about the dangers of infighting and the dangers of pursuing vice over virtue. He was writing during the period of the anarchy, where Britain had been plagued with civil war, and it looked very likely that they were going to be invaded by that the Normans were going to be invaded by the Welsh and the Scottish during the time. So the message of my speech essentially was, as the white, if we pursue the path of infighting, if we pursue the path of doing nothing more than complaining like Gildas in his cave, we're going to basically end up like the Welsh, where we do become foreigners in our own homeland. So that essentially was the message, and that we must therefore become the King Arthurs that we need. We must ignite the heroic spirit within ourselves, and become the great men that our generation calls for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that message hit nearly every single ear in that room. I could certainly, I was sat directly at the front, but I could hear the shuffling. As soon as you came out with that message towards the end of your speech, I think it became very apparent that it was certainly hitting those ears and thinking, oh, actually, yeah, we need to do something here. And actually, I think the timing of your speech as well, being on the Sunday after sort of all the other speeches, I think you were very perfectly placed there, I must admit, because I don't know if you ladies agree, but I do think it was very apparent this year that it was very much about doing things. Let's get something done. Let's stop this, complaining, as you were putting it, Elizabeth. Don't pursue the path of complaining. Don't sit on Twitter and just sit there commenting on various things. Let's actually do something now. Come on, if you want to, as we were putting it, save your shire, then you really need to go and be the King Arthur of your time. Sure, Maiden and Thought Crime Queen, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic speech. It was Yeah, I loved the connection between the historical, element of it and then bringing it into the present day. And yeah, I think Bird, you put it really well. It's last year it was Logos versus Praxis, wasn't it? And so we were sort of beginning to talk about more action, but this year it was a real focus, kind of kicked off by AA speech, which I'm sure we'll cover as well. And I think, yeah, it was really inspiring, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, Elizabeth. So thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah. Thanks for the feedback. I mean, one thing, I had someone come up to me after the speech and say, a lot of us, we understand that we need a leader, that we need, great men to lead us, and we're awaiting King Arthur's return, someone to pull out the sword from the stone and unite us as the modern Britons together. But the problem is, the thing that plagues the White is we just keep waiting. We just wait a leader instead of like doing anything ourselves. It's sort of like how Christians say, oh, things might be bad and civilization's collapsing, but it's okay because we can await the return of Jesus, without realizing that Jesus Jesus calls us to act in our own age and to carry out good works. So I think that essentially was what the speech was trying to nail into everyone is, well, you can be heroes yourselves, and you don't have, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to become warriors and go out and fight and become kings. You can become leaders in many other ways, such as community leaders, such as being a leader of inspiration or virtue, such as what a good mother is to her children. And I think the message that of my speech with Frodo and Sam was an important one, because you have this in the Lord of the Rings. The hobbits essentially are this race where there's no heroic men among them. There are people that prioritize comfort rather than hardship. Yet despite this, Frodo and Sam carry out one of the most important missions within Middle-earth, which is to destroy the One Ring in Mordor, and they do it successfully, which is why in the end of the Lord of the Rings, Aragorn says to them, no man shall bow to you, because you have done the most important tasks of them all. And I think it's important for people to realize that no matter their past, if they failed in a sector of life or they did badly in school, it doesn't matter. You can still ignite that heroic spirit within you, no matter how old you are. I mean, there's the example of Oliver Cromwell, for example, who only became the man of action he was when he was in his 40s. So it's never too late to start. But we most certainly need to start now, sooner than later. Because with the message of the Witan, the new order, I think a lot of people fail to realise the new order isn't essentially going to be one we win, unless we actually work towards it. There's two new orders we can go down, which is one where our enemies win, or one where through hardship and suffering and making sacrifices we come out on top.
Certainly, yeah, and I think it's very important to note as well. We constantly go on about the leaders, those who take charge. But I think it's very important when you mentioned, Frodo and Sam. One thing that I very much thought about, and I didn't really get a chance to catch you after your speech either. We did have to leave very hastily after Carl's speech at the end. Was that I think the followers are also very important in this. So yes, you do have the leaders, you might have your community leaders, etc., but you also need that following. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you disagree with this, please do chime in. But without those following, you essentially fail to lead, because a leader without followers is no one.
Mm-hmm.
So you had sort of Sam constantly following Frodo, but let's face it, Frodo would not have made it through without Sam's help.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing people fail to realise, most certainly in this sort of individualistic society we live in today, where everyone wants to, become great men, is they fail to realise that great men need those who submit to them. those who are led by more noble goals than themselves, that they're willing to say, well, through you, this goal can be enacted out, therefore I will follow you, no matter where the road leads us. And you see that with the relationship with Sam as well, with Frodo. He doesn't care that he's marching into Mordor. He'll probably never see the Shire again. It's his loyalty to Frodo that keeps him going, and that sort of friendship. It's like people have to realize that for one to be a teacher, they need the student, and for one to be a good husband, they need the wife to submit to them. If we care for the hierarchy of society, we have to understand that submission is an essential part of it. You can't have a king without his subjects.
Certainly, yeah, and I would definitely say that some people were born to be leaders, whereas others were born to be followers. I would never call myself a leader in any sense, but I will be loyal to those I follow. Whether that is at the moment, a small community project. I'm not in charge of those community projects, but I am a very key part of them. And you need those people, you need those teams in order to make things happen. It's not necessarily down to just the leader. The leader is there to essentially get the ball rolling and to lead those followers in the right path. That you want them, you're all there because you believe the same common aim, you have the same opinion, etc. So you're not just doing it because you bow down and worship the leader. No, you're doing it because you all believe in the same thing. If you didn't, you wouldn't be there. Yeah,
precisely. And it's also important to know, if you have a leader who rises and says, oh, well, I'm going to be king, I'm going to be leader, you should never trust that person whatsoever. A true leader as well is someone who's submitted themselves to a more noble goal than themselves. You see this with a king. A good king is a king that has submitted his loyalty to God and understands that, like Canute with the waves, who puts his hand out to the waves and says, see, I cannot stop the waves because no one is mightier than God. That's an example of good kingship, a king that understands that he is only fulfilling that which is more noble than himself. And I think Carlyle also speaks about this on hero worship, the fact that a leader doesn't strive to become a leader. He's only in that position because he's so dedicated to his goal that he's willing to sacrifice everything for it. He's willing to be that man of action, and through that inspiration, people just naturally follow.
I do, but when you hit the nail on the head there, as soon as you said people naturally follow, and I would go as far as to say that true leaders are not the ones who stand up and say, I'm a leader. They're the ones that people do just naturally gravitate towards. They do just naturally follow. They do just sorry, I'm just casually muting Shield Maiden there. She is on a train at the moment. Yes, they do just naturally follow that leader. They don't have a need to stand up and say, you will follow me, because any true leader should know that if they are humble enough and are really that that true King Arthur figure, then people will gravitate towards them, and they will say, show me the way, and be the leader we need you to be.
Yeah, and you see this theme as well in Historia, but by Monomyth. For example, with the example of Vortigern, he's very much a man whose only goal is to become king. His only goal is to become the ruler of the Britons, that he's willing to sell out his own country and fight foreigners into the land, such as Hengist and Horsa with the Anglo-Saxons, to fight a war which he started with Scotland. And through that selfish goal, he brings absolute ruin onto Britain. But after the example of Vortigern, you have Ambrosius, who was a real historical figure, and some say he was the figure in which King Arthur was actually based on, who overthrows Vortigern and restores order back to Britain. He's the king in which, allegedly, according to Joffrey, he built Stonehenge and had all these celebrations to celebrate the restoration of the Britons from this tyrant. And he represents that. He represents this man whose sole goal is to restore his country and bring order back to it, which is why Geoffrey points out that there is no king which is more noble than Ambrosius. And you see that also with King Arthur. His goal solely is to, again, restore order back to Britain. And he marches onto Rome, not for the Britain's glory or for wealth or for any selfish gains, but to say to Rome that the Britons want their freedom back, and you can't oppose your rule back onto Britain. His goal thus is more noble than whatever he desires. And that's what true kingship is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thought Crime Queen, do you have anything to add to Elizabeth's point?
Yeah, I was or just to go back to the you guys were saying about the followers. I think it's a really important point and something that in our circles we need to really be thinking about, because I think the types of personalities that have, of the sensible centre, are quite that we live in an individualist society, as you said, but I think on top of that there is an element of the sort of a reactionary nature, and people who don't follow the crowd. If they did, they wouldn't have made it this far to these circles. And so it's definitely a challenge that I think we'll continue to face, where there's a lot of really strong characters and a lot of people who have very strong ideas about what they want to do, and it is going to be very important to follow when necessary.
Yeah, like when a leader comes along, we have to be ready for them.
Certainly, yeah. I think it's very important to point out as well in our sensible centres, as you say, Thought Crime Queen, there are certainly quite a few leading figures, I would say. It's not necessarily down to one person and everyone follows them. There are quite a few figureheads, as it were, that we all do kind of follow in those certain ways, but all within the same sphere. And I think that's very important to note, because we all get on with that. There's no sort of battle royale of, oh no, he's the next King Arthur. It's very much, okay, well, they're the King Arthur in that specific circumstance, and they're the King Arthur in that circumstance, because they have completely different, and we will cover this in the different talks. We'll go on to that in a moment, over the weekend. But because of all the different topics that were discussed this weekend, I do very much note that there are sort of figureheads within these different areas, which is a very good thing to have, and it's a very good system to have as well, especially when you're all thinking of the same ideals. Anything to add on that before we jump on to the other speeches of the weekend?
Yeah. Just to finish, one last point, which I think I make towards the end of the speech also, is, well, a lot of people, they expect, well, it's going to be one man that leads us, and I think, well, this can be quite an outdated idea. If you look at, for example, the 1916 uprising within Ireland and how Ireland sort of gained their independence from the Union, it was a number of leaders who made sacrifices that day on Good Friday with the 1916 uprising, and they were able to coordinate together and bring this plan they had into action through something called the Gaelic League, which was this league made up of socialists, trade unionists, Catholics, Irish nationalists, who all came together because they were concerned about the Irish language and they wanted Irish independence. And it was through these organisations that such men of action could coordinate together and form their own groups to actually put their ideas into action, which is what you see with the 1916 uprising, which triggers Irish independence and causes the Irish Civil War. So I think what we have to remember is we're expecting men of action. We're not expecting one man of action who will come to unite us all, but rather we'll probably see different types of leaders arise from our communities, and we'll be inspired by them. But we also need to remember as well that the leader, the hero, the king is inspired by those who came before them. It's inspired by men who made a sacrifice before they did. And you see this again with Irish nationalists in the late 1800s. Patrick Pearse writes about this in his one of his essays, and that he's inspired by men who did what he could not and then were killed for it and hung by the state. And it was these deaths of these men, which he considers heroes, which sort of kept Irish nationalists going. And we need to remember that as well. It's through the sacrifices of men of action that a new order will arise.
Very well put. Very well put. I am conscious of time, so if this does run over, we'll see what happens. But jumping all the way back, because Elizabeth, I'm aware that your speech was second to last on the Sunday, so we're going to jump all the way back to the Friday, and starting with AA's speech, the first speech of the evening, tuning out the clown show, which I did find quite amusing. But again, it was very much apparent. And as someone who never watches the news, I could relate to this very much. I do not watch the news. I had a discussion with my boss about this because he thought I was crazy, that I never watch the news. I don't have any news apps or anything on my phone. You know, I don't really follow sort of news pages on Twitter or X, as it's known now. And if I do, I don't tend to engage with them. And he could not understand, my boss could not understand how and why I was able to live without all of this so-called knowledge. And my response to him was, it's not knowledge, because 9 times out of 10, it's media made up stories, and you don't know what's the truth and what isn't, and it's mostly there now for your entertainment. It's not there for facts. And I made the point to him that if anything were to happen that would directly affect me or my family, etc., then I would find out in other ways. And he just couldn't understand this. I said, you know, if it's something majorly important that's affected friends, family, etc., then I would have a phone call. I would hear it on the radio. I would, you know, there are ways and means I would find out about it, word of mouth, etc. So this became very apparent in AA's talk, as I mentioned a second ago, called Tuning Out the Clown Show, because I feel like I've been doing this for a while, but I do think it's more apparent now because technology is constant. You know, it's all around you. You scroll through social media, you scroll through even just putting on the telly, and things instantly pop up. So tuning it out, and it is a clown show. Let's be fair. A lot of it is absolute drivel, and it is for those who aren't aware of it, it can be very difficult for some to be able to pick out what is real and what is basically just entertainment. And I think a key example of this would be certain parents, and having to explain to them, you know, reading and believing everything they see on the internet. And it's like, no, that's not real. And then you have to find another source to prove otherwise, or deep diving and you know, fact checking everything for them. What's your ladies' comments on AA's speech there?
Well, I have to admit, I only turned up halfway through his speech because I wasn't feeling so well on Friday. But from what I gathered from towards the end of his speeches, it was very good. I like the point he made in relation to we're often just audiences to right wing entertainment and to the news, and I agree with your point as well about the fact that it's very healthy not to watch the news. I mean, the news really does. It's just there to distract you from what's going on, and we can see this, for example, with the riots that happened within Southport. You know, that should have shocked people for months. Those deaths of those young girls. The fact that we've like simply moved on from it because something else has came up on the news now should be quite worrisome. It's, the news really just it's just a cycle. It makes people angry, but they don't do anything with that anger whatsoever.
Absolutely, and as another example of that, you mentioned the riots at Southport there. When the riots in Plymouth were happening, I know a few people who actually live in Plymouth, and no, I didn't know these riots were happening until I saw a post on Twitter. I thought, oh, what's happening now, sort of thing. And I scrolled through, and I did the classic. I googled it and thought, well, what is going on? And it all kicked off. For those who don't know, go and have a look. It all kicked off, and I knew instantly how much of that media was fake news, because I was getting live reports from friends and family who live in the city, so I could actually know exactly what was going on and where and the extent of it. So it does irritate me in regards to the media, because it is there to amp things up and make people more angry. But as you say, Elizabeth, what are we actually doing with that anger? Are we doing anything, or are we just sitting and entertaining ourselves because it makes us feel something?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, this is the biggest problem with the right wing today, is it's so online. Is people are simply just audience. It's like the equivalent of our grandparents and parents watching TV every evening. We like to think, oh, we're better than them because we watch YouTube videos now by AA or Edward Dutton or Sargon of Akkad, and we do something with our free time. But it really is the same. It's, well, what are you doing? You're just watching entertainment. You're not doing. You gain all this information from the videos, but then you're not doing anything with it whatsoever. I think Morrissey put it well in the fact that in the song "Spent the Day in Bed," where he says, "Don't watch the news; it will only try to frighten you." And I think the way that we as the right need to go forward with is we need to simply stop being audiences to media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It is very much being, as you say, being audience to media, and as nice as it is currently being, talking to you ladies on a streaming platform, it is very much, we are here to try and discuss important topics or in a way educate people, which I would say there is quite a fine line between the education side of media, etc., and the brain rot side. The algorithms now are purely there to keep you entertained, so that you keep scrolling, so that you quite literally sit there brain rot and waste your time. Whereas channels like, well, as we try to do here, we don't expect people to sit and stare at the screen. It's very much, if you pop it on in the background whilst you're doing something, absolutely fine. And I will say it's channels such as AA's channel. Alex listens to it quite a lot. It'll be on in the background quite a lot because he'll be talking about something that could be educational, which I do find quite useful in a way. But again, there is that fine line, and we do, as a collective, need to get away from that brain rot side of the internet and you start doing something. If you're going to listen to these podcasts or streams, even our own, we're always very grateful that people are listening, but at the same time, personally, I don't know about you ladies, but I am very much aware that I myself tend to say a lot, please do not sit and stare at your screens all day. Go outside, go and do something. It's almost like you're a toddler again, and you have to give yourself screen time. Limit your time to a certain amount a day. And if you are going to use these sorts of platforms for learning, then that's great, but use it wisely. Try and not get sucked into the clown show of the media.
Yeah, exactly. I think just to go back on my point as well, I don't think the problem particularly is like Academic Agent or Edward Dutton. I think some of the things, well, most of the things they say are extremely useful. But I did like the point that AA made within a speech where he talks about Nick Fuentes and the Andrew Tate types. Is these people have never done anything useful within their careers. They're simple entertainers. And you see this with Nick Fuentes and his following. The Goipers look up to him like he's like some sort of messiah, like he is the return of the king. But all Nick Fuentes has done throughout all of his career is, he is very funny, he is very entertaining, but he's caused needless infighting, and just unneeded brain rot. He's never done anything for the right within America. He's never advanced any goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I again disagree if you do not agree with this point, but I'm certainly more likely to listen to someone's media or videos, etc., if they've done something with their lives, if they are actually a figure that I can look up to, that I can listen to, knowing that, one, their opinions are coming from a point of knowledge and not just, oh, I think this just because I felt like it. And somebody that has actually done something with their lives, that do have a standing in society. Do we have any more comments on this before we move on to the next speech?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. I think, like you, Birdie, and I'm sure many of us, I don't watch the news anymore, and it is amazing what filters down. And it is all, I think when you stop watching, you start to realize that there's this strange, how controlled everything is. You talk to your family and it's assumed that you'll know what the latest topic is, whether it's the riots or Ukraine or COVID, whatever. And I think it's a bit like the other speech, much like voting. It can really give the illusion that that you're doing something when you're watching the news, whether it's mainstream media or even podcasts on our side of things. And I think that can really drain the energy that's needed for action. And it is often AA and our circles excluded, but a lot of it is containment, and if we tune it out and disengage, then we can't be contained, and that's why I think it's so important.
Certainly, yeah, and I think it's. Again, I'm very happy to admit that I don't tend to know what's going on up country 90% of the time, because I do tend to put my attention towards what's going on a lot closer to where I am, purely because I can have more control over that. If something's happening in London, immediately I can't have any effect on that. If something happens in my village or in my nearest town, then I can do something about that. I can have an input. So I think it's very important to in a way almost not confide yourself, but to put your attention in the right areas. If it's, as we were mentioning earlier, saving your shire, etc. We always say it as a bit of a joke, but at the same time, do what you can do in your area. If you're able to have an input further away from where you are, then fantastic. But the majority of people can't do that.
Exactly, and just to add to that point real quickly, a lot of us within these circles make the point that the Southport riots and the riots that spread across the country in July led to nowhere. But those men who came out that day after those little girls had been stabbed, they've done far more than what most people in these circles can say they've done for the right. Just simply being outraged and rioting and putting that sort of anger into action is far more than what one can accomplish through just watching streams and getting angry over a news article and then doing nothing with that anger.
Yes, yeah, and I will mention for the record, I do not condone violence, but I do agree in terms of they are doing something, you know, whatever that something may be. They were able to do something almost immediately, which, you know, as you say, a lot of people weren't able to do. Conscious of time, we'll move swiftly on to Apostolic Majesty's speech, The Pursuit of History. Does anybody want to start us off on this one? Assuming you all went to that talk.
Well, I went to the talk and I thought it was really, really interesting. I'll admit it did somewhat wash over me after a day of travel and seeing everyone and it being a little bit late. So I don't have all that. I don't have any sort of interesting points really on that one.
I appreciate the honesty. To be honest, and as great as Apostolic Majesty's speech was, yes, I have to admit we'd just done a almost 7.5 hour trip ourselves, and yes, it was starting to wash over me a little. So I do apologise to Apostolic Majesty. But the Pursuit of History, again, it was very much. I almost found it linked with your speech a little bit, Elizabeth, actually, in terms of, you know, as we mentioned earlier, bringing history into the present, and very much linking that kind of Arthurian spirit that that a lot of us do have, in a way. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I found this speech very interesting. I spoke to him briefly after his speech, and I found out he was originally going to do a speech on Geoffrey of Monmouth, which is quite funny. But I think it was very important, you know. A lot of us within these circles were very much interested in history, but we fail to grasp what history actually is. You know, history in school and is far different to history in reality. It's sort of grilled into us in school that it's, you know, memorizing dates and names, but when you actually become a historian yourself, or you become interested in history at university, for example, you realize, well, these memorizing dates and names is completely useless. History is far more than that. History is looking to the past for answers. This is why we're so interested in the Roman Republic, because the answers to the decline of civilization is all there, really. What you know leads to the breakdown of civilizations? How do we recover from our civilization collapsing into ruins? But most importantly, I think history is important, and this is how historians, particularly in the 12th century, saw history as it's important for moral lessons. Historians like William of Malmesbury, for example, and Henry of Huntingdon, within the prologues of their works, they said, I'm writing this so rulers will have something to learn from it, and they can take on the virtues of those who came before them and learn from the mistakes of others. And that's essentially what history is. We need to look to history for our moral answers and our lessons today.
I find it very interesting when you say it's not just a case of, you know, learning from the moral answers and lessons, etc. But would you also agree that history can also teach us not to do things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
that's the purpose of history, not to repeat many of its mistakes, but I mean, you know, our biggest sin really today, and the sin of the Britons, for example, is their ignorance to history and the ignorance to lessons of old. And I think that's why we're in this situation. It's when history becomes memorizing dates and names. I think that's the warning sign of that the fact that your civilization is going to collapse.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely a deeper meaning to history, because I completely agree with you. You know, history isn't just about learning dates and names. It's about the deeper meaning, the spirituality, the actual messages behind what happened and why it happened. You know, because there are so many stories, myths, legends, etc., that has happened throughout history that we can still learn from today. You know, we do take a lot from history and bring it into the present. However, I would say there's still a lot to learn. And that, I mean, I would say that's the great thing about history, because as we know, there are certain parts of history that are in a way unwritten. And how do we learn from something like that? Well, you learn from the parts that are there, and in some ways you can piece things together.
I think another problem with history as well is you often you get talking to someone in the street and you ask them, "Oh, what's your favorite historical period?" And they'll say, "Oh, the Tudors." And you go, "Okay, why are you interested in Tudors?" And they'll say, "Oh, because they look cool, and I like their architecture." And I think that's, again, like something that's quite sad about modern society, is people are often interested in history because of the media such as like Game of Thrones and movies, or TV shows, or they just like the aesthetics. No one seems to be interested in history outside of our circles, really, because it has something to teach. A lot of people today as well just think they see history as something quite linear, that things have only gotten better, and that the ways of the past are backwards, and will never return to them. I think this thinking has plagued people's view of history.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the aesthetic as well, that's very much apparent. As you say, especially in TV shows and movies, etc., they do tend to focus very much on certain time periods, which, to be honest, is starting to get a bit boring. But I will make a point of, I do believe that historic literature is very important. I don't think it's focused on enough, because there are definitely key points and lessons that can be learned from things that they don't teach you in school. There is so much about history that they do not and will not teach you on any level, and it's almost down to you to go and dive deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, although I just criticised history as a sort of as entertainment, I think history as entertainment is important. I mean, I got into into history through my grandparents and my parents taking me to museums as a little kid. But I think really what ignited my love for history truly was Skyrim. was this video game released in 2011, which was based around Nordic culture, and it's sort of I mean, it's not historical whatsoever. It's just based on the historical themes of old Scandinavia and so on. But there's something that sort of ignites that heroic spirit in the little kid, and the same with Fable as well. If anyone's played Fable here, it's this fancy medieval game, sort of set around themes of British history, made by a British studio. And because it's set around themes of British history, it sort of ignites this love in a little child for their country. After you have to play in this game, I remember I just wanted to play in the woods all the time in the English countryside, because it reminded me of this video game. As these forms of media can actually do a lot of good in igniting that patriotic spirit in children.
Yeah, I mean, I think that links us back to AA's talk. This is how, as we'll notice as we go on, how all the talks this year did seem to mold into one another, which was very, very good, I think. In terms of, as we mentioned earlier, discussing tuning out the clown show, that parts of media and games, etc., can be useful if used as in an educational way. I'm very parent of the time here, so I think if we do one more talk, and then I think we're going to have to do a part 2 of the review of the Witan, because we do have a lot more to say than I thought, than I actually realised, which is fantastic. So we'll swiftly move on to a speech that I'm a little bit biased of, I have to admit. My other half, Alex Masters, Power-Assisted Friend-Enemy Distinction. Now, I had never heard this speech. A lot of people assumed that I'd already listened to it over and over. No, I hadn't at all. The Witan was the first time I had ever heard it, just as everyone else did. So I had the same reaction as everybody else did. I'm very biased, so I will have to say, well done to Alex. It was a fantastic speech, as many I know have agreed. So, ladies, do you want to chime in on your opinions on Alex's speech and what you thought of it, etc.?
I thought it was excellent. It was really good. It was really exciting. I think it was one of the first times at the Witan where someone's really presented something solid, with a plan, which they put a lot of work behind, that isn't sort of pie in the sky, this is what we need to do, but it's, sort of, there aren't any logical steps to it. And I thought it was really inspiring, and a really, as you say, Birdie, a lot of the speeches were complimentary, and I think that there's a theme of action going through it. And then I think to have a speech like that was excellent, and especially the timing as well, because the evening speeches on Friday were great, but then Saturday morning, I suppose, is sort of really the beginning maybe of the Witan. So I know it was in the back of everyone's minds of, this is the sort of thing we mean. It can come in all sorts of different forms, but this is the potential. And it was excellent.
Yeah, my only criticism of the speech was the fact that it was put at the 9 a.m. slot. It should have had a better slot during the day. I've heard very, very good things about the speech. It really was the best speech at the Witan, and from what I've heard, I believe it. Unfortunately, I didn't make it. I stayed up late on the Friday night writing my own speech, so I accidentally slept in, which is I think that's the only thing I regret about the Witan, was the fact that I missed Alex Master's speech.
You certainly weren't the only one, Elizabeth. I had quite a few people coming up to me throughout the weekend who I don't know if they were too shy to mention that they'd missed Alex's speech directly to his face, but they were all coming up to me and asking, and I have to admit I did just sort of direct them, and Alex's, I sent them over to him, because yes, they were hearing quite a lot, and it was very apparent to me that they definitely got conversations going. And yes, apart from it being the first, it was a bit of a silver lining, actually. Going back to Thought Crime Queen's point on it, yes, it was the first speech on the Saturday, but at the same time, because it was the first speech on the Saturday, a lot of people didn't make. Well, not a lot of people, perhaps less than a quarter, didn't make it for very obvious reasons. But it did very much get the ball rolling for the weekend, I think. And as you said, Thought Crime Queen, he did come very prepared. He didn't just stand there and go, oh, maybe we should do this. It was very much, no, he'd come up with the complete energy vision, and he'd given a lot of time and effort into that. And not just having the stats and everything about the energy in this country, but linking it back to history and how we've done things before, and how we can very much do things again if we put our minds to it. And being able to actually listen to a speech where it tells you how you're going to do that, and they openly stand there and say, we can do this, and this is how, and as you say, Thought Crime Queen, it was very much, we do tend to get a lot of speeches where it's, we could do something. Why don't we do something? But actually having one that had a whole plan sort of laid out in front of you is something I would say slightly different, especially for the Witan, because it was almost a complete. It was complete. There was a lot of people. I didn't really see much of him over the weekend. It was quite funny, really, of people coming up and saying, okay, so what, I want to do this, or I want to do that. How can I do that in my area? And it was all relating to Alex's complete energy vision, which, is absolutely fantastic, and I can openly say now he's currently on the phone to a certain person who is also at the Witan, speaking about his complete energy vision, and he's meeting up with somebody in a couple of weekends' time. So the ball is very much rolling, and this isn't just something that only he can do, which I think is something that's very apparent as well. It's not something that just engineers can do. It's something that absolutely everyone in that room can have a part in, whether they are leaders or followers. Everyone can take part in what he was talking about, which really, again, kind of hit the nail on the head and linked back to the Logos versus Praxis last year of, okay, let's do something now. Let's make a change, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and I think generally we we love to talk about philosophy and history and all of those sort of things. At the Witan, a lot of us are very we're there for the kind of intellectual things, but also we are all normal people, and the the energy crisis has, I'm sure, hit all of us, and it's very noticeable now how expensive it is. And in a sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs sense, if we're cold and worried about money and things like that, it's very difficult to think about other things. And our people as well, it's the same. I think it's something that has come to the forefront of people's minds, and in terms of gaining traction and power, this is the sort of thing that really speaks to people, because it's just very obvious. It's not pie in the sky. It's a need that's undeniable.
Certainly, yeah, and it is very apparent in today's society. As you say, it's very noticeable now. We all notice the prices rising for our electricity bills, our gas bills, absolutely everything. And if people want to do something now to help their friends, family, even just your own village, etc., we're not just talking about your own household here. We are looking at a bigger scale. You're looking at being able to provide for your village, for your town. And the way he spoke to every single person in the room, and spoke to everybody as a whole, not just it wasn't just a case of individuals. It quite literally was the friend enemy distinction of, everyone in this room is a friend, because we all want the same thing. We all want to be able to get through this. And this is a way that we can do it. And being able to pinpoint something so acutely and come up with that full plan. And it wasn't just, oh, this is how you make your own electricity. No, it was a hell of a lot more in depth than that. And it does, again, I'm going to sound very biased. I hope he's not listening to this, because his head's going to explode. It doesn't just take, the clever ones. It doesn't just take, men like Alex to come up with these plans to start everybody off. It does take every single person in that room to be able to get these things going. The fact that we all had Alex there to come up with this full and almost finalized plan to be able to move forward, to be able to make a difference, not just in your own county, but across the whole country. That's a massive step for anyone, and it's a very big feat to think of. We were talking earlier about not being able to change what's happening sort of 200 miles away from you, but in this particular case, in some ways, yes, you can, because if you get a group of friends together, and if you have one in each county, as he was saying, you have sort of that group of leaders, as it were, and you have one in each county with their followers, you are then able to set up, basically your own energy plan, your own heating, your own fertilizer for the fields. So many products that came out of this complete energy vision that would massively benefit absolutely everyone. in this country. And at the end of the day, we had control of that. It's something that we were able to have control of, that we were able to help with in many, many different ways. I'm not an engineer by trade, but there are ways that I can help with this. There are ways that absolutely everyone in that room could help. And and that's what I found very fascinating. After his talk, the amount of people that were just coming up and saying, "Oh, can I, grill your brains about this? Can I talk to you about this? Can I ask you a question about this? Oh, here's my business card. Oh, here's my business card. Oh, give me a phone call. Oh, can we meet up next month?" It has absolutely spiraled. And I will admit I am very, very proud of his speech, and I'm very proud of what he's managed to achieve so far. And I really do hope that something comes out of this. Because it would be absolutely fantastic for all of us in this sphere, and not just us. We can actually make a big difference here. We can do something, which is exactly what Dan Evans. So I had to look at my page then to see the speeches Dan Evans was going on about in his speech. Let's actually do something now. We've done the talking, we've had the discussions, but now's the time to have some action. Any other comments on this one, ladies?
Oh, that sounds like an amazing speech. I can't wait for the speech to be released, to watch it. But it's exactly, I'm going back to my speech of we need to be men of action. It sounds like Alex's speech was, yes, we do, and here's how we can do it. We definitely need more speeches like that, and more practical thinking.
Absolutely. And Alex kind of joked saying, this is coming from a mind of an engineer, but it is very much the practical thinking element of that. We've done the academic side of the thinking. Let's switch to the practical side now and see what we can do with all the knowledge that we've accrued over the years, and with all the ideas that we've built up. Now's the time to put them all together, put our heads together, and finally do something that is going to make a difference for everyone in the best way possible. Thought Crime Queen, do you have any final comments on Alex's speech?
No, I don't think so. I think I think we've made some good points, and I echo everything that you ladies say. And Birdie, you're absolutely allowed to be biased anyway about your husband. But I'm sure even if you're objective, it was fantastic, and it is really exciting. And I really hope that it's one that that we can listen to again. And it's exciting that he's talking to people, because it's something that I'd like to see where it goes and follow it.
Absolutely. I think we definitely, with all the speeches this year, I think we certainly are heading towards very exciting things. Not necessarily just this year, but in the future and coming months and years ahead. I think exciting things are going to happen. With the time being so close to the hour, I think we will have to go on to a second part with this, if you ladies would like to join me again, because I will say a massive congratulations to the Shieldings team. It was another fantastic event, and I don't know if you ladies noticed, Thought Crime Queen, I think you've been to every Witan as myself as well. But there was certainly a lot of new faces this year, which was very, very nice to see, actually. And somebody just commented saying that they didn't think there'd be many ladies at the event at all, other than the few that did the speech. And I do have to admit, it was very obvious this year. There were a lot more women, which was very, very nice to see. But a lot of new faces in general, which is great. We're reaching out to people, and it's very nice to see that there's new faces coming in, and we can have new discussions and come up with new ideas.
Yeah, I agree. Though it was really nice to see see more women, see people who've, you know, got married and are starting families, and, you know, tracking everyone sort of year on year is really nice. It's this a strong sense of community. The new faces sort of integrate really well, and I think the standard just gets higher and higher, and the conversations get more interesting. I don't think I had one conversation about, you know, oh, look what the left are doing now, or can you believe this or that. I think everybody's just tired of it, and wants to be looking at where we're going and what we're going to do, and looking, you know, inwards and outwards at the same time, but certainly not backwards.
Certainly, yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and I will admit they're all very sensible conversations as well. There was nothing that was over the top or ridiculous or anything that didn't make sense to anybody there. It was all very sensible opinions and sensible ideas that would benefit the whole country, you know, not just, as people would assume, not just the right. You know, it was actually benefiting Britain as a whole, which I found very, very enlightening. Elizabeth, do you have any final comments?
Yeah. Well, the Witan, as it says in the name, is a gathering of wise young men and women. And I think that everyone watching who didn't attend this year most certainly should attend next year. I think it is going to be the Witan, in which men of action will be coordinating, and people who are interested in doing something for their country will be coordinating, and it's there in which we'll actually see action be put into practice. So yeah, make sure to buy your tickets next year. I think it's going to be even better.
Absolutely. And on that very high note, thank you, ladies, for joining us. Shield Maiden has sent her apologies. She's she lost signal whilst on the train. But thank you for Shield Maiden for joining us very briefly. There's a few comments on the Corncrake magazine. Yes, I've put the link down below. For anyone who hasn't read it or subscribed, etc., then go do so now. It's a wonderful magazine that Shield Maiden creates with a few other very talented creators. I've put both Elizabeth's and Thought Crime Queen's links below as well. Please do follow on X, subscribe here, because we are planning to keep Wamen Hour going, and fingers crossed have a growing panel, especially with things happening. As I always say, if anybody has any Wamen suggestions, then please do send them over our way if they want to join in the chats. Then we are always open for more Wamen, for more opinions, etc. But thank you very much, Elizabeth and Thought Crime Queen, for joining, and we will arrange a part 2, and I will do my usual and post it on X. Or Twitter, as we know it more commonly. Yes, we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Night.